It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
Take Command podcast from Odyssey Sports. What's up? What's happening? Craig Hoffman, Logan Paulsen with you. And Logan, good one today. Gonna get real nerdy X's and O's type of stuff. And then ask one of our last remaining mailbag questions, kind of leftover from last week, about some of the rookie offensive linemen and decisions about roster building in regards to them and kind of how they spent their springs and how we anticipate them spending their fall. So we'll get to all of that. But you, sir, you've been doing a research project. You've been doing some homework. And that homework is to look at the differences in the Air Coryell offense, which, of course, a version of was run here the last 3 years under Scott Turner, and the West Coast offense, which is going to be run by Eric Bieniemy, coming off that Andy Reid, Mike Holmgren, et cetera, coaching tree. So I'll let you take it from here. I certainly know a little bit about the histories here, but why did you want to do this besides the obvious, and what are some of the high-level things that you found before we get into the nitty-gritty?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that was interesting was, everyone always throws these terms around. Oh, it's the Air Coryell, it's the West Coast offense, but there's no no one really gives any context for what that means exactly. Obviously, they were kind of founded and developed by different people. Obviously, Don Coryell with the Air Coryell offense, and then the guy, the coach of the 49ers, his name escapes
Bill
me.
Walsh.
Bill Walsh, thank you. Kind of while he was in Cincinnati, and then the Browns, and then moved to San Francisco, where it became like the thing that it is now, which is like everybody's running it. And I just really think like that whole process, and we'll talk about the history of it a little bit, is like, Mel Blount, they made that Mel Blount rule in 1978, basically saying that you can't tackle receivers to the ground anymore in coverage. And so basically like what that means is it kind of opened up some of the passing games, right? And it made it really challenging to press receivers in the way that they had been traditionally pressing them. And so kind of at the same time, which I was really surprised about, the Air Coryell and the West Coast offense kind of develop. So in that 1978 type of range. And so basically like, I think there really are, they are byproducts of the system with which they were created. And what I mean by that is like, Air Coryell and Don Coryell kind of said, we have Fouts. He's got a big, strong arm. We've got some of the best receivers in football. Let's push this sucker down the field, right? Let's be really aggressive. And the best way I can articulate it is it's like they're gambling, right? They're basically saying like this is a lower percentage throw, like on a vertical route or a deep post or a deep corner, kind of in that 15 to 20 yard range of target, but the yield is much, much higher. And obviously they were able to kind of maximize that. And obviously Kellen Winslow Jr. with like this move tight end, and then, kind of really the first F for Joker tight end in the NFL kind of characterizes that role. And you see that now, like probably with Greg Olsen in Carolina having that great move piece there that can make all those plays for you. But also they have great offensive lines because you got to protect those concepts that move down the field. And then, Bill Walsh and the West Coast offense is kind of his quarterback when he was when he was with the Browns, I think, was a guy who didn't have a big arm. So it was kind of like, let's spread it out and create a lot of width in the field and work on our timing and work on precision. And that's where you see some of these West Coast offense come in. And so like, that's like super high level, like some differences you see. And like historically, obviously, like the tree for the West Coast offense as defined by Bill Walsh is insanely long. And then with the Air Coryell, it's a little bit shorter, kind of a tighter group of guys that run that. And at this point in the NFL, there's a lot of cross-pollination and a lot of carryover between the two. But what I would say is that, like, basically, the West Coast offense is the Bill Walsh offense is trying to stretch you horizontally, trying to stretch that 53 yards and then throw with good timing into some of those spots, as opposed to trying to get the ball down the field and stretch the defense vertically. So those are kind of the big differences. And also the other thing that really came out in like my research, and I think we talked about this a little bit on the podcast, is the Air Coryell was kind of the first like number scheme offense, the 989 type of stuff where you got the X has a go, the Y has a post, and the Z has a go. And to me, the thing that came out of like reading and kind of looking at the different plays that were original Air Coryell is it really did limit their ability to call and diversify formations. And that was one of the things we kind of talked about last year with Scott, is like that language or that lack of language and the lack of tags really made it challenging for them to kind of get out of that 9-man route tree or 9 combination route tree, you know, like one's a flat, two's a slant, and then all the way three's a drag and kind of go through. And so I think that's one of the reasons you see people from the West Coast offense, especially in the NFL, kind of have more success, because it's like, oh, hey, they they changed how they're running cover 2. Now we don't have to change our whole offensive philosophy. We just tag somebody different in the play call. And so that, I think, was really interesting as kind of a defining feature of why one is a little bit more successful, I would say, than the other. Obviously, there's a lot of cross-pollination, but, you know, high level, that's kind of what I was thinking about there.
Yeah. So a couple things. Virgil Carter was the name of the quarterback in Cincinnati. I looked that up while you were talking. That is not a fun fact that I know or knew, but I guess it's one that I know now. Virgil Carter, known for his mobility and accuracy, not necessarily his big, strong arm. So he, you know, Bill Walsh designed this offense. He leads the league in completion percentage. The way I've always thought of it is vertically versus horizontally oriented. Ultimately, you're trying to create space. And you know, the Air Coryell system tries to create that space vertically. And like you said, there's a little bit lower success rates, but higher payoff. So you wind up with kind of that average in the middle. And then, you know, the numbers of the equation change the other way for the horizontally spaced West Coast offense, where higher success rate, but lower yield. And thus, hopefully, if well executed, you kind of average out the same. But like you said, I think it's interesting too, some of the ways in which, especially even recently, guys like Cooper Kupp and what's the dude in Hunter Renfrow in Oakland and now in Vegas, the way those guys have kind of created routes, that's a lot harder to do in a numbers-based system, because you can't just say like, all right, that's a 13 route. I guess you could, but it's a lot easier to be like, hey, this is a return route. Like, what's a return route in the Air Coryell system? It doesn't exist.
I think they got it. So like now, like when you get into more modern playbooks, so Scott's offense, Norv's offense in Carolina, it's the 9-8-9, and then they got to tag the F, that kind of third receiving option. He gets a tag. And so they did kind of adopt some of the tags, but even that becomes challenging, because then you have to tag 2 people, and you are kind of in this weird hybrid where you still get the 9-8-9, you know, F return H check or whatever, and it just the flexibility of the rest of the concept, I don't think matches the tag all the time. So it's kind of in like these 2 spaces, and so, you know what I mean. And so like I think that let me pin down on that for a second. So like you have a structure with a 9-8-9. That's easy to talk about. It's 3 verticals, right? And traditionally in the Air Coryell, like the backs would stay in and protect, the fullback would protect, the halfback would protect, and you would just rely on one of your big receivers to win. Like maybe the most iconic Air Coryell offense of all time is Dallas back in the 90s, right? With Irvin and, you know, Emmitt Smith and that group that was really dynamic. Think about big receiver who can win contested catches. And that was one of the criticisms here when they brought that Air Coryell derivative offense here, was because they didn't have that big body consistently winning that contested catch. Like Terry's good at it, but it wasn't like he's not like 6'5", just jumping over people the way that. So
he somehow wins balls like that, but he's not the prototype.
Right, absolutely. And so you got 9-8-9, right? And then I want the back to run an angle. That the concept now, and this is one of the things that you get in the West Coast offense, it's now a different concept. The defense is going to react differently to that angle route. The seam is going to move different. The linebacker is going to push different. So instead of me having to say 9-8-9, but you have to hear the tag for the F as the tight end or the Z receiver or whatever it is, now I can just be like, hey, you know, like, for example, 3 verticals in Kyle's offense is all go, right? And you would say all go special if you want them to cross release. You get all go special F angle. And then you're just like, and it's an easier, because you're like, okay, all right, he's giving me words to kind of cue in on this, as opposed to me having to adjust this 9-8-9 concept, which is our base concept, just knowing the different route tags for other players. So it just allows you a little bit more flexibility, I think. And like when you look at the trees, like you look at the trees that stem from Mike Holmgren, like damn near everybody in the NFL runs a version of that offense.
Right.
Outside
and
of
Holmgren, I believe, was an assistant under Walsh. I can double check.
Correct. Yep. Him and Mike and all those guys. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and the other thing too is like, okay, so how do the concepts build off each other? So, like you say, the 989 type of thing, and then you kind of compare it to all go, right? So, all go is not necessarily, anyone who played Madden even knows this, right? It's not just four verticals, right? Against certain coverages, one of those becomes a post.
Yeah.
There's also, I know, like when Jay was here, there was all go thunder, where the two outside receivers against certain coverages run stop routes. You have all
Yep.
go special, where you have the switch release, but they all build off similar concepts, as
Sure.
opposed to like if you're trying to, you'll have to help me out with the numbers here, but like all go thunder with that
Yeah.
stop routes on the outside. How does that translate to a number system versus simply all
S-
go thunder?
So that's the
So you got
crazy
deep
thing is,
comebacks.
yeah, it's like I want to say it's 4, but then they
I
don't
think
really
that's
have
right.
it. They don't really have like a deep comeback. They have a hitch, right? And so that's where it gets a little
Right.
bit like weird. Is like, do we, because a 7's a corner, an 8's a post, a 9's a go, a 6 is a dig, or a 5's a dig, so it's a 6. Deep comebacks is a 6, so it'd be 6-8-6, right? But what do I have to tag the F on a go every single time, right? And that's where it gets a little bit cumbersome and clunky. And then it's also formationally a little bit weird, right? It makes it challenging to kind of say, I'm taking, the middle number is the Y usually, right? And I'm going to move the Y to a bunch, right? And now all of a sudden it's like, how does that play out? Are you coaching it to go in order where it's like it mirrors the bunch, or does the Y have to remember that I've got the 8 no matter what? And so I think, again, we've talked about this before. It's one of those things where it's like people super familiar get really comfortable, but the more you read about the offense, like one of the criticisms is that it doesn't have the flexibility week in and week out to just say, hey, like let's tag this with this, and let's add this, let's change this split, let's do this. And so I think that's one of the reasons why you see the prevalence of the West Coast offense now, and they've cannibalized pretty much every Air Coryell offense and made it fit, concept and made it fit in the West Coast offense. But it
Right.
just gives you flexibility, because I could be like, hey, let's go solo right nasty, and then I get the Z receiver in a tight split, and now I can say, hey, Z curl, and then I can say a bow concept on the backside, right? And that's just it's just easier for me to make sure I'm getting everything out. It does require the players to know more, like remember it more. But I think in today's NFL, with defenses always evolving, you want the ability just to be like, hey, we've got something for that solution that they've presented. So
Right. And the routes become very flexible too. And I think that's the other big difference, right? Is, the 989 again, or the 686, like they exist in both offenses, right? But the
yeah,
coaching points might be different because you're trying to create either vertical or horizontal space
yeah,
based off of which offense we're talking about. And that's where I think the magic of coaching really is in the NFL. And we've talked about this with Bieniemy a lot, is the attention to detail, the coaching points. Sean was always great at this. We want to hit this spot because we're trying to
yeah,
move this guy, which creates this window. And those kinds of things I feel like are more flexible and against current defenses have better success in the West Coast system. That said, I think
yeah,
guys like Kyle and Sean and Kevin and these smart younger coaches who have been around multiple systems, especially, probably take some, and even their predecessors before them that got exposed. They probably took some coaching points from Air Coryell. So when you talk about
absolutely,
the kind of amalgamation, the blending of these two systems, you can teach Air Coryell teaching points on a certain
yeah,
route. That was, Bill Walsh taught it this way. We're going to teach it the Don Coryell way, but we're running a West Coast offense with West
yeah,
Coast verbiage, and we actually get the kind of the best of both worlds. And I think that's where the best NFL offenses are at this point, is they
yeah.
understand the principles of what they're trying to achieve. They've done the work to figure out what's the best way to achieve them, and they have the language to actually get the players to line up that way and execute that way on the field on Sundays, and that's how you get the best of the best.
Yeah, and I think that's a really succinct description of what's going on. I think the other thing that sticks out to me, though, it's like in the West Coast offense, like how easy is it to add RPO? How easy is it to add zone read? Because it's just tags, right? I'm just
Mm-hmm.
tagging more stuff, and I think that's where it becomes a little bit more flexible in terms of language and verbiage to get some of that stuff done, as opposed to kind of having to live with one foot in one language and one foot in the other. It's like, hey, everything's tags in West Coast. And Curtis Samuels has talked about, we talked about this on the show, about how wordy the play calls is. And that's true of West Coast. Everyone remembers that Jay Gruden, Spider 2, Y banana, and the crazy formation that comes before it. But it allows you to position people where you want to position them. And so now it makes it more stressful for the defense, because like everybody runs Spider 2, Y banana. Like it used to just be done out of like a normal pro set. tight end to the right, fullback strong, halfback in the dot, and then your Z receivers to the right and your X receivers to the left. But now with like the complexity of the formations and the motions, we can get to something completely different, using that same personnel that is confounding to the defense that says, oh, well, we don't know exactly how they're lining up. So I don't know. I just think that was a really interesting kind of arc. And then when I, went back and I was like, let's see if this applies. You go watch Kyle Shanahan, you go watch Mike LaFleur or, Matt LaFleur, excuse me, in Green Bay, you go watch Mike McDaniel in Miami, and they still abide by some of those same principles in terms of creating width and stressing those underneath coverage players to get wide in coverage. And it was really eye-opening to me because it's so subtle. Like some of the stuff that Scott was doing, like everyone runs dagger, a go by number 2 and a dig by number 1. Everybody runs that. But with Kyle and with those offenses that stem from that tree, there was a huge emphasis to get something to the flat, to pull that player out, just to stretch that underneath zone a little bit more. And, here, I don't know if it's coaching or detailing, but like they would run a version of scissors, post by the outside guy corner. And you need some type of flat defender to pull that flat player out of the way to open up the corner. And they would be doing it from across the ball. And Kyle and these other offensive structures, they do a really good job of saying, like, that's going to take too long to affect the player we want. How do we best maximize his positioning in this situation to affect these coverage players the way we want? So that was really interesting to watch. We talk about running routes. They would use play action. They would use jet sweep motions to create this horizontal space in the underneath coverage of the defense. And then the throwing windows are just great for the quarterback, as opposed to like these low percentage throws where I got to throw over somebody to a big out and really ask the receiver to make a tough catch in a tight window. It's like the windows are huge, and it's not all the time, but I'd say it was definitely more consistent. And that abides by that West Coast philosophy: horizontal stretch underneath, creating throwing windows for the quarterback.
Definitely. Last thing real quick on this. How does the run game fit into this? Like, how differently is it called West Coast versus Air Coryell, and how does that ultimately affect the offense as a whole?
You know what? It went through a couple evolutions. Like it went from like, that pro set, fullback, running back, big back, physical running style. And, like to me, they're called in a similar way. Like, I don't know if there's a lot differentiating them, but in the Air Coryell, it's this heavy gap, counter, power, downhill running approach. And obviously that's much, much different than the outside zone stuff that Kyle runs. And now Kyle has adopted more, same with Eric Bieniemy and Andy Reid, has adopted more gap scheme to kind of sprinkle in to offset the outside zone. But one of the things the outside zone does is the extended action in the backfield creates horizontal stretch in the linebackers and the safeties. And so you can use, like there was a couple times where, it's a 2-man route concept. And I'm like, how are they creating so much space? And you go back and watch it, and what the linebackers have to see, they're using the run action to pull guys out of zones, which is great. And when you're running gap scheme runs, it's so downhill that they don't really move as much, and so they can just drop into their spots underneath stuff in a way that you can't do with outside zone. So I do think that was a surprising discovery, the more film I watched, honestly, of like, I don't know what I was expecting, but just the impact that the run scheme has on the pass game in some of these, and how it impacts the action. Like even like, for example, in Kansas City, the way they run some of their RPOs, it's this super long delayed handoff where the back's running very lateral, and you see the linebackers have to respect it, and they move over and they create pockets, where the quarterback can make an easier throw. And I just thought, well, that's detailing that handoff intersection. That's detailing the back. That's detailing the receiver split in width, right? They do it sometimes with pre-snap motion. There was a play where Kyle's an empty personnel in 21, and they just have the backs like basically on the sideline run, just turn around and look at the quarterback. But because of their width, the underneath players have to run to those spots, and they create beautiful throwing lanes for the comeback. So it was a really cool thought experiment for me to see kind of some of these principles applied, and how the details of the horizontal stretch really maximize throwing windows.
Yeah, for sure. And the verbiage is relatively the same though. Like run
for
game
runs,
is called. Yeah.
I mean, obviously that's where you kind of run into, like, I would say yes. You could go from scheme to scheme, and sometimes it's a little different. Like some guy gets a crazy, wild hair up their butt, and it's like, oh, we're going to use colors for runs or something. Whatever it is, and you're just like,
Yeah.
how did you come to this conclusion? But a lot of times, evens to the right, odds to the left. Gap schemes tend to be tighter numbers, like smaller numbers, as opposed to outside zone, which is those 8 and 9. So obviously a little different, but I'd say more similar than different, just in terms of approach and philosophy. Like you tend to emphasize different runs in the Air Coryell.
Sure.
And this was something else I wanted to bring up. So like that 90s team, that 90s Cowboys team where
Right.
Norv Turner was the offensive coordinator, that team is kind of held up as the archetype of the modern Coryell offense. And I look at how good that team was, and they had the best offensive line in football. They had the best back in football. They had the best quarterback in football, and they had the best receiver in football. And that to me is
Seems useful.
very, very hard to replicate as a result, I think. And like that's one of the reasons why Kyle and his tree is able to kind of go everywhere, because they say we understand that we're not always going to have the best quarterback. We're not always going to have the best offensive line. How do we maximize this in the context of this offense? So like that was another thing that stuck out to me. The language difference, the tools required to make the Air Coryell good was the other thing that stuck out to me. And then just seeing it in action and the principles was interesting. But again, I just want to iterate this point as the last kind of thought here is they cross-pollinate. Like Kyle runs Air Coryell stuff. He just gets to it differently than Scott did, for example, just as a comparison. So it's everyone's running a little bit of everything. Just the principle, that horizontal stretch was so interesting to see.
Yeah, and for our purposes, the language allows for more flexibility in the West Coast. Commanders are moving to West Coast. Hopefully that allows for some of the stuff that we were hoping to see over the last couple of years.
And you see that in training camp. You see a diversity in formation. You see a diversity in concept. You see a diversity in the ability to get guys out in personnel. So it's all there for you. And I think that is something that, again, gets me really excited. So,
yeah. Gonna be fun. Training camp. Just let's see. Let's carry the one. It's like 5 weeks away. It's crazy. July 27th, camp opens in Ashburn. Take Command podcast from Odyssey Sports. I'm Craig Hoffman. He is Logan Paulson. Wherever you are watching or listening right now, make sure you're subscribed, following. Depends on the application. Spotify has follow. Apple Podcasts has subscribe. YouTube has subscribe and like, because you love this right now, but there's not a love button. So just like it. All right. Logan, kind of a hot topic that we haven't touched on yet. I wanted to get through the mini camps and through OTAs and through everything first before talking about this and kind of see how it played out. But we had a mailbag question about this as well. And I've kind of thought about it, and I think it's time to have the discussion. The Commanders used their 3rd round pick on Ricky Stromberg, center out of Arkansas. They used their 4th round pick on Braeden Daniels, who are calling a tackle. Those guys are pretty deep on the depth chart, to where, like, if they weren't draft picks, you'd be like, oh, wow, they're on the fringe of making the team kind of place on the depth chart. And that seems, in my opinion, very silly for a 3rd, especially 3rd and 4th round pick. I will say that Stromberg was a late 3rd compensatory pick, pick number 97 overall, but he's still a 3rd round pick. And I just think there's kind of 2 avenues to go down here. One, the evaluations of the players themselves, what you thought of them coming out, what you've seen of them so far this spring. And then kind of this larger philosophical question about roster building of taking what they're telling us, which is that these guys are backups and possibly even deep backups, and using a 3rd and 4th round pick on it on a football team that needs starters, and there are players available that could have helped more immediately. So I don't know which direction you want to go first. We will cover both of them, but I think this is something that should be discussed, because it's, the margins are thin in this league, and these are the kinds of, roster decisions, roster building decisions that help you miss or make the playoffs. And of course, they're trying in an incredibly important season with new ownership coming in with this front office to prove that they're a make the playoffs kind of team.
Yeah. This is something that I've been kicking around for a while, and so I guess we'll talk about the players first, right?
Sure.
And so in the 3rd round where they were picking, I think he was like the 97th pick, like Ricky Stromberg. I like him as a player. I do. I don't value the center position the same way that they do. Obviously, that's a priority for them. You go out and you sign Nick Gates, you bring Larson back, you draft Stromberg. Like that is something that if I was building a team, Logan Paulson GM, I would not do. I would
Why
try to.
why is that? Why is the center position because obviously it's not like it's not important. You can't throw one
Yeah,
of us out there at center. But like
right.
why is that a position that is not as valuable for you?
Because in this landscape of we want to diversify our positions, we want guys that can play multiple spots. Traditionally, centers can't play multiple spots. Guys that just play centers, and most guys that I played with, most guards have some center background in their history, right? And so you get a whole bunch of really good guards, and then one of them backs up at center, like your swing guy, like Wes Schweitzer. I think Wes Schweitzer was a perfect example. He's a serviceable guard. He's probably a better center, but he can play all three spots. And so, they've been kind of touting position flex, and I understand the value of that in today's NFL. That's extremely important. You're only carrying 7 or 8 guys on game day. You need to make sure you have guys that can play multiple spots. But they've kind of said Nick Gates is going to play center, Ricky's going to play center, and that to me is a little bit confounding because like the easier position to play, at least in my perspective, is center. And why is that? Centers aren't covered up usually. So a guard usually have a 3 technique, someone over their outside shoulder, a 2-eye, someone over their head, or a shade. And they have to negotiate that kind of at all times. If you look at Kelsey, the center in Philadelphia,
Jason Kelsey, yeah.
Jason, like a lot of his highlights, he's working in a combination with another player, right? Because that's the structure of an NFL defense. Very rarely are you just like drive blocking a nose. And so to me, like I want a guy that can block a 3 technique and then play center. I don't want a guy that can just play center. So as much as I like Ricky as a person and as a player in terms of, I was really high on him as an evaluation. I'm kind of like that. Where does he fit in terms of this roster construction idea, right? How does he help you long term? Because he's only going to play center. I don't like, I've seen him around the building. Like, I don't think he's ever going to be a top flight guard. He just doesn't have like the length or the size that some of those really good guards have. So I think he's going to be an excellent center, but that unfortunately means that he's not going to be able to play another spot for you for a couple years at a minimum, right? Because that's where he's getting all his reps. That's where he's most comfortable. That's what he did in college. And so I think that's the thing about that pick that is somewhat confounding to me on a certain level is he a good player? Absolutely. Does he fit the vision that they've been talking about? I'm not entirely, I don't know. And I think maybe long-term they view the O-line in a different lens than I do. And what I mean by that is I think that, that's a luxury piece that fills out depth for you. And if you think the O-line's ready for that, that's great. And that's a question for Ron about where he feels. And I think he's been pretty emphatic about he feels that group is ready and they just needed some kind of touch-up type of depth pieces. And that's entirely that's one of the things we're going to have to find out as we go into training camp.
There just seems to be a philosophical difference, I feel like, between the way most people think about offensive line and the way they are. And
what do you mean?
We will see whether this is arrogance or whether this is, well-founded confidence. It very much feels like they think Eric Bieniemy can just make this offensive line work. They are not super talented. They are not.
Well, to be fair, they are talented, but they haven't lived up to the talent at all spots, right? Like Cosme, a very talented guy.
Sure. Okay. Cosme's the one. He's a second.
And I would say Sadiq Charles also. When you look at him on paper and look at his height, weight,
but what round draft pick was he?
I think it was a 4th round pick, 3rd or 4th, something like that. Yeah.
So like, there's no first rounders on this.
Correct.
Line.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There's no studs. There's no Trent Williams. There's no some of the guys that they've had.
Brandon Sheriff, right?
Yeah, some of the guys they've had here. Some of the guys they've had in Kansas City. There's not the guys that they have in Philly. Like the talent level is not high.
Yeah.
I mean, they're all NFL players, but that's kind of the thing. They're all just maybe somewhere between good. Cosme could be pretty good. Cosme was a 2nd rounder. Somewhere between pretty good to like solid NFL players. And it seems like they think the scheme, the play calling, the coaching of Eric Bieniemy and his staff can elevate them to a level. And by the way, a different approach to quarterback play, let's call it. Getting the ball out quickly, having someone who's a little bit more mobile back there. Obviously, Taylor was mobile, but Sam, they're going to actually run
Mm.
And that threat changes how defenses rush. So I just feel like there is not a where a lot of people I think went into the offseason, whether this is media type evaluators, us included, fans, whatever, NFL observers, saying they need to add talent to the offensive line.
Yeah.
They certainly got a little bit better position by position. There is a
Mhm.
major question at left guard. I would say center is still kind of a pretty big question. I mean, Nick Gates hasn't played a lot of center in his career. He hasn't played a lot in his career period because of injuries, and Cosme hasn't been able to stay healthy. Like there's still a lot of legitimate questions about that offensive line in terms of the talent, but they seem to be okay with that. And so I'm forgetting what you said that prompted that thought for me, but it does seem because you were like Logan Paulson GM would do it a little bit differently.
Yeah.
That seems to be a part of the calculation is that they just need like NFL average caliber football players, and the scheme and everything else around it will do the rest.
Well, I'm pretty confident that the scheme will elevate that group. I think when you
Sure.
look at how Wiley was used in Cincinnati, he's a good player there. And it's not, and he's
You
not
mean in
in
Kansas
this
City,
Kansas City. What I say doesn't matter.
Cincinnati?
Yeah, yeah, Wiley, and so it's not going to be kind of put in this Air Coryell 7-step drop offense where he's got to win these really tough matchups down and down out, and so. I believe the scheme will elevate those guys. I think Cosme will play better again because they're going to be leveraged less. Like when you go back and watch some of the past stuff they did last year, it was a very high leverage situation oftentimes. And I think Wiley will be good. I think Cosme's got to develop. I feel pretty confident about Gates after watching him in the spring. Left guard, like you said, still a question mark. And then obviously left tackle, and I think he'll play better too. Leno will play better because of the scheme. I think we're kind of missing the main point where when you say looking at draft capital and draft allocation, was Ricky Stromberg and was Braeden Daniels the right selection, given
Which is
given
where
your
we're getting
given your philosophy? And so that's the thing that I keep kind of hemming and hawing about is because like I love my evaluation of Stromberg, but like you said, he's a third round pick. Like where does he fit? And again, if you're drafting off your board and he's the best guy on your board, I'm totally fine with that. I'm totally fine with that. Like you got to trust your evaluation. Is my evaluation exactly the same as yours? No. But then I go and I say, Braeden Daniels, like they see him as a tackle. That's what they've said. And when I look at my own evaluation, like I don't know if I'm as confident as they are that he can play tackle. Like I think he's going to be, to me, he reminds me a lot of Sadiq. He's got high athletic upside, technically very raw, and probably plays guard in the NFL, right? So you've done a good job of getting guys that theoretically could have play multiple positions, but unfortunately you end up with guys that can only play guard. Like Chris Paul, I think is a great example. Sadiq's a great example. Like if he had to play tackle in a game, if either one of those guys had to play tackle in a game, you'd be a little nervous about it, right? Like they said that last year when he played against Dallas. They were like,
Yeah.
he's our third tackle. Like we don't feel great about it. There's a reason he's your third tackle. It's because his body type and his skill set lends itself more to guard. So I think that's the thing that is a little bit little confusing about the whole process is like you've prioritized position flex by getting tackles that can play guard. But at some point you need to say we need to solidify this group with guys that can play tackle at a high level too, right? And I think they've done a good job with that. I think Wiley fits that mold to a certain extent. I think Leno fits that mold to a certain extent. I think Korn fits that mold. But in terms of areas that needed depth and development, I would have thought they would have kind of prioritized maybe tackle with one of those picks, with the third round pick or the fourth round pick. And that's not an indictment of either one of those players. It's just in terms of fit and helping the roster, like they have a lot of guards on the team, And so that's the thing that I'm kind of like, well, does he move the needle for you at guard? And then, Ron, I have a lot of respect for Ron, but he comes out and says Braeden Daniels not in the guard competition. And it's like, so he's going to basically be inactive for the whole season because he's not playing tackle for you this year. So that's the thing that I kind of get a little bit. And again, I'm not in the room. I'm not in the evaluation. These are just thoughts that I have regarding those decisions specifically. And I have a ton of respect for Ron, a ton of respect for the organization. And they have a vision, which I respect, but sometimes it doesn't always line up in my mind, I guess.
Sure. So here's the way I'll put it, because you've now touched on the part that drives me nuts and is, I would say, more of my lane, bigger picture type of stuff than, you who sits down and watches the tape and like really has an opinion on Braeden Daniels. I
Yeah.
could watch tape for hours of that guy and think, I don't know, what did Logan think?
Yeah.
I'm not an offensive line evaluator, and I don't pretend to be. What I am is someone who can look at a big picture and be like, well, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And there's just an inefficiency in it. Why are you drafting in the third and fourth round when you could be getting starters, or at least guys who are going to be parts of rotations and impact you this season? Why are you drafting backups and inactive players in the
Yeah.
fourth and especially the third round? If things go well this year, Ricky Stromberg doesn't play. And
Yeah.
you're not even giving him a chance. And like, that's the thing. If ultimately you draft him and Nick Gates is able to stay healthy and he is just better,
Hmm.
okay. Like, that's a great problem to have. Hey,
Right.
this guy's good. Sweet. He beat out our rookie. Ricky. Keep getting better. And in the future, you're going to play for us. But for right now, like, Nick's better than you. He's got experience. He's more prepared. And he's going to start for us at center, and you're going to be the backup, or you're going to be inactive. And maybe eventually you get onto the active roster. That's fine. I have no problem with that. But when you come into training camp or come into OTAs and he's starting to work with the fours and the
Mhm.
threes behind guys who have been in the league and been around, and what they are, and what they are is like fine at best, with all due respect to like Tyler Larson and was it Noah Laufenberg, who, by the
Yeah.
way, Noah Laufenberg is a large human.
Big
That
man.
is a big man. I kept going, who is 74? That is a giant.
He's a tall fellow. Yeah.
Yeah, tall, wide, great,
Yep.
big offensive lineman. But like,
Yep.
he's played a little bit and it hadn't gone great.
Yeah.
So if you're not giving reps to a rookie who you took in the third round over Noah, all due respect to Noah Laufenberg, as explained, large man Noah, I mean no harm, please. I mean no harm. And Tyler Larson,
It's
who's
just draft equity. You've
right,
invested in that position
right,
with
exactly.
a not inconsequential piece. And so I've been a part of teams. They draft a tight end. I know the score, man. Like, and so it's a little surprising that they haven't abided by that. And I think Ricky is a guy that could push for starting minutes. Probably not this year, but at some point in the future. He's a good football player, right? The thing is, like, that is, I think, probably more to your point, is, were there guys that were more impactful? Now, it's impossible to know because draft evaluation's tough and everyone has a little different opinion. And I know that they were looking at offensive linemen earlier and that fell through or whatever, right? And that happens. But
Yeah.
and they felt like they needed to address the need. But I think the other thing is, like, like you said, like, are they going to play football for you this year?
Are you going to
And
give him a chance?
Ricky,
Like, are you
probably
going to
not.
legitimately give them a chance to earn snaps on the field, which isn't going to happen practicing with the force?
Yeah, and I think like Ricky, of the two, Ricky has the most talent potential to play this year. But Braeden, like I said, there's a lot of athletic upside, a lot of things to be excited about with him. But, like, based on what we've seen in OTAs and based on his college film, he's not going to play for you this year. Like, he's not, and so he's going to be one of your 53 guys that are active on game day because you don't want to lose him, and he's going to be not playing football for you. And so I think that's the thing that is, again, like, to your point, it's tough to negotiate that for a team. Now, I think when you take a big step back and say, like, maybe the roster is healthy enough to tolerate kind of a youth development program. And what I mean by that is, you look at the defense, and I don't know where you would draft anybody, maybe linebacker. I don't know. But obviously,
That's the one position that I was thinking of, and that's the point I would make next is, like, they don't need any more corners. Like, they're
yeah,
already pretty deep there.
receiver,
And
no.
especially
Tight
like
end,
third
no.
round. Yeah.
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 Running back, no. Like, it's and so, like, where would you go? And linebacker is a position in this last draft, especially, that was tough. It was a tough position to evaluate. It was a tough to find a position where guys. So, like, I think I told you this when I'm doing my draft stuff, where I just go yes or no for first pass, right? Can he play in the NFL? Yes or no? And it was hard to find guys that I would give a yes to, just to give you some context. So I know a lot of those guys went earlier in the round, the guys that were kind of tweener high upside players. And so maybe they were like, there's nobody here that we think can do it. So why am I going to waste a pick in that area just for the position, on a position that's been devalued by the NFL? But I do look and I say, well, that's the other crazy thing is they did a great job with UDFAs getting 4 receivers that look good enough that they can make the squad. So it's tough. And the thing that sticks out to me, and I think I mentioned this to you, Craig, is like there were other players around that position that I had a higher draft grade on, and I don't have access to the medical. And so that's why the guys that I felt like were emphatically yes in terms of how they could contribute and compete for a roster spot. And they went in a different direction. Again, like Ricky was like my fourth graded center, and all the other centers that I had ahead of him were gone. So like I like that's good value there. But for this team in this roster, is there a different way you could have gone?
Yeah, I mean, the other thing I would say too is like they took Rodriguez and KJ Henry later. Could they have gotten better players at those positions? And we'd have to go back and look at the board, and even us doing that, the reason we're not going to do it is because we don't know. We don't know what their evaluations were.
Yeah.
And for all we know, they got steals that KJ Henry in the 5th is going to wind up being a better NFL football player than who they would have taken in the 3rd. So, I mean, we're now in this post-draft, like, we'll see kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that's kind of why I'm like, he's practicing with the 4s. He's moved up to the 3s. I think Stromberg by the end of OTAs did get a couple reps with the 2s, if I'm not mistaken. So maybe it's just, kind of the rookie formality, and we're making a little bit too much out of it, and we'll see what happens when he gets to training camp. But if you had asked me the day after the draft, and we probably talked about it this way on the podcast immediately after the draft, is Ricky Stromberg their starting center? I would have said, yeah, probably. Like, that's why you draft him in the 3rd round. Excellent. Good draft pick. Good job. Yeah. But if he's not, and he's not even going to legitimately get a chance to compete for it, that changes how I view the use of that asset, right?
Yeah.
Now I'm getting ready for the radio show where I'm going to talk a lot about Bradley Beal and asset management, right? But like, this is the game in the salary cap era of this sport and other sports, is that you have to manage your assets well. And whether that is trading a player who you're not going to re-sign and recouping some value, if that value is greater than the compensatory pick, a la the conversations we could be having about Chase Young or Montez Sweat if this season goes sideways, whether it's using draft picks on the right type of guys who are going to contribute in the right ways for your roster. You just can't be inefficient. And I just feel like that's my kind of gripe with it, is those picks felt inefficient. If they have the roster depth to deal with that, and that is also like a way to build, right? You build it up enough that you can take some of those risks and maybe, say, hey, Daniels is not going to play for us right now, but we feel like in 2 years, he could be a really good player. Okay. Yeah. If that's your timeline, and you feel good about every other position, but you just better have everyking else shored up. And that's the thing where I think we're a little unconvinced.
And my question to you would be like, is what are the odds that he's gonna reach that he's gonna be like, have that ability to be your starter or whatever it is, like that's the thing. It's like I don't know. I don't want to get too sidetracked there, but it's that what if question that you posed there, I think is really compelling, because it's like, yeah, like that'd be great if he turns into this guy, but you're counting on a ton of development from a guy who's very raw. And again, there are flashes with Daniel's film, and I think he has the physical capability of being a starting caliber player. I just think it's going to be a guard. And I think Stromberg is a guy that I like a lot. He's close to contributing to an NFL roster, but he's going to sit for a year. And again, like, would you have been better served like drafting a guy that was more ready or whatever? And it's an unknowable question right now, and we'll know in a couple of years. But I think that's why that feels a little funky to a lot of fans and a lot of guys in the media too.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll add too is, especially at the offensive line position, yes, you're in on field goal protect, but there's not a lot of special teams value in the meantime.
Yeah.
And so you wind up being inactive and like literally being, respectfully a 0 because you're not playing the entire year, plus whatever you add on the practice field, which can be valuable. But it's not like if you miss on a safety, he's Jeremy Reeves.
He's playing teams.
Yeah, and all of a sudden we accidentally, we missed on our safety, or maybe they knew he was going to be a teams guy, but like he's not good enough to play safety down in, down out for many years of his career, but he's an all-pro special teamer, so he's contributing in a very meaningful way. You don't get that on offensive line. And so that's another, kind of facet to this argument that I think should be considered.
Yeah, so and I just want to finish up. Like I think I've met both those guys, Braeden Daniels and Ricky Stromberg. They're awesome kids. I think they're good football players. We're just talking about, was that the right decision for them? Not are those guys bad football players? I'm not saying that. Got a lot of respect for them and what they're doing is tough. But does this roster have the depth to basically redshirt 2 players and a 3rd or 4th round pick for the year? And I don't know if they do or not, and we'll find out soon enough.
Yeah, and I'll say this. We'll finish up on a positive note, if you will. To the team's credit, someone's got to be inactive.
Yeah.
So
Right.
typically it is going to be later offensive linemen. If those are talented, futures projects, if you will, then okay, someone's got to be. But I think the reality is we know that the idea that like, oh, these guys are going to be inactive the whole year, we don't need those roster spots, is wishful thinking with injuries in the NFL, where guys are going to have to step up because, guys in front of them go down. And how do you have the depth to fill those spots? And that's really the ultimate question that we're asking, to which we'll find out the answer as the year goes. Coming up on the next podcast, I do believe we're going to have James Smith-Williams on the show. He's got an awesome football camp coming up this summer. We'll talk to him about that. And of course, all of the playing things, do a little biography stuff with him, some coaches and mentors that were impactful along his journey. I've gotten to know James pretty well over the last couple of years. I know you've worked with him, so that should be a really, really fun chat. Looking forward to having James on the show. Other than that, we're working on some other cool stuff for the summer, so make sure you're subscribed, and then training camp will be here before we know it. If you liked this episode and you're watching it on YouTube, make sure you hit that like button, smash that subscribe button, as the kids say, and we will see you next time here on Take Command. Thanks for watching this clip of Take Command. First, why don't you like it? It lets other people know that it was good, and then they should watch it too. And Logan, we have a new exclusive home for full episodes.
We do. 1067 The Fans YouTube page. Go check it out and please subscribe.
Yeah, do what Logan said.
Do it.
Very, very smart.